Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hidden Histories Collective. I'm Chris Robinson Jordan, genealogist and historian, and I am so excited to be here with you this evening and cannot believe that 2025 is coming to a quick close. I don't know about you guys, but it went by pretty quickly for me. I looked up and I was like, whoa. It's June, September, and now December. But this is exciting to be here and to continue this journey with you. And we will continue doing this into the year as well as into 2026. So, but I want to dive in and talk about a much needed conversation. But I also want to do it with the goal of going back in time as far back as we possibly can. And as you can see here, we have found another book, a 1526 book, which reveals the Indigenous diversity. And I'm excited to talk about this subject because I find that when we go back in time, we actually get a much clearer picture of the Americas. And it also really kind of settles us into what America is today, because so much of the history is still around us everywhere we go. So, but let's dive in. But before we do that, I want to let you guys know that we are actively seeking guests for 2026. As some of you know, we also do interviews with amazing people across the country. We talk to family historians, we talk to truth tellers, and we had some great conversations this year with people such as Carrie Davis, Lisa Cypress, Wild West LA, and it's so many amazing people. And we want to continue that trend and continue having amazing discussions and really hearing your stories and your genealogy journeys. So please feel free to reach out to us, email us, and we'd love to hear from you. So, yeah, let's dive in. Let's dive into the presentation. And I want to set the tone a bit as we move forward. Then we're going to talk about Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo, who wrote the book, the 1526 book that we will be referring to, and also look at his observations of the Indigenous. And I want to remind everybody that this is an ongoing series that we will be doing and looking into many of these old books, looking at passages and really doing a deep dive into them and really studying America from a lens that we don't get to see often. So here's one of the videos that we did not too long ago, which is incredibly popular. And I will be providing links to all of the videos in the series. This one was another popular one, Erased from History, America's First Peoples. So all of this is important information that I think we should be not only putting on the record as Hidden Histories Collective, but also so that we can share this with our children and our grandchildren as we move forward. So, yeah, one of the things I like to do is set the tone for the presentation, because one of the things I find is that there's so much to like unpack. And I know that it's impossible to cram centuries of knowledge into a 30-minute video. But I definitely want to make sure that when we do talk about certain subjects, that at least there are some opening thoughts and things that are important to say up front. And one of the things I want to say in relation to this book in particular was that melanin was the norm for a very long span of human history. Lighter skin was the exception, not the rule. And I want to say that because sometimes when we talk about the Indigenous, particularly here in the United States, we have been marketed, I will say, a stereotype of what an Indigenous person looks like. And that stereotype is not necessarily reflective of the diversity of the Indigenous people and Indigenous nations here in America. I think people are learning more, but we're still pushing up against a great deal of racism and colorism, as you will. And and I have to say this, before the 17th and 18th centuries, there was no fixed racial color hierarchy as we know it now. And that's really important to say because, as you know, we're dealing with colorism everywhere. And I think part of that is because people are they're forgetting their ancient past and not honoring their ancestors, quite frankly, because we all have an origin story. And it's important that we acknowledge that origin story and not run from it. So when we think about descriptive adjectives such as black, brown, light, and dark, these are not identities. And that's why I try really hard not to say that I'm black or that people are black. I like to ask questions. I really want to know more about people and where they're from. And I don't want to make any assumptions about that. And if you spend any time traveling, particularly overseas, or if you've gone to certain countries here in the Americas, you know that looking at people and making a determination about who they are based on their skin color is probably it's very ignorant, and you will get corrected quite quickly. So I just wanted to say that these are descriptive adjectives and not necessarily identities. And and this has to be said too, the world was dark because no one was organizing humanity around whiteness. Let's be real. When the racial categories started, that was when things became that's when you begin to see caste systems begin, and not just in places like India, but definitely here in the United States. And it's still there. It's still very prevalent and present. So I just had to make that note as well. So when we think about race, quote unquote race, it's a very modern construct, because when you look at human variation, it's actually quite ancient, very ancient. And just look to Mother Nature in general. There's variation everywhere. It's all around us. So let's dive into Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo. And he is one of many historians from Europe who came to the Americas and did a lot of cataloging and traveling and living and spending time here to understand the Americas. And of course, I could do a whole documentary on this particular individual all by himself. But to talk more about Ovidio, he was born in Madrid and educated in the court of Ferdinand and Isabella. And for those of you who understand the history of Ferdinand and Isabella, which is his own entity, its own story, I think it's important to know how Ovidio came to be. Now, for Ovidio's sake, we will just kind of breeze through this because there's a lot to unpack here with him. Now, Ovidio was a page to Ferdinand and Isabella's son, which was the Prince of Asturias. And from about the age of 14 until the prince's death in 1497, he served in that capacity. And then Ovidio went to Italy for 3 years before returning to Spain as a bureaucrat to the Castilian Imperial Project. And then he went on to have 2 wives, and he married Marguerite de Vergara, who died in childbirth and then to Isabel de Aguilar. And they had multiple children, which later died within several years of joining Oviedo in America. Again, there's a whole, there's a lot of intrigue with his time during the Ferdinand and Isabella's reign, which he was serving during that time of their, I guess you could say, their terror, and that's that's the best way to describe it. Now in 1514, Santo Domingo. No, let me back up a little bit. Oviedo was appointed supervisor of gold smelting at Santo Domingo in 1514. But prior to that, the Spaniards had already come to the island of what was called Hispaniola, and that included Haiti and the Dominican Republic. But as you know, the Spanish, quote unquote, founded it in 1496, but it, of course, had existed for some time, and they had been coming to the island for some time. So when Ovidio arrived there, he was in charge of the gold, if you will. It's pretty intriguing stuff just looking at his time there. And then at one point, he was also placed in charge of the Fortaleza Ozama. And there's also a large statue of him there. And as you can see, the Fortaleza Ozama is like this fortress. And it was a very important strategic space and place in Santo Domingo, for those of you who've ever been to the Dominican Republic. Now, then he went back to Spain in 1523, but he visited the Americas like 5 more times before his death in Spain in 1557. So he spent a considerable time in America going back and forth. Now, let's talk about his book. He had written several books, but this one in particular was basically a chronicle of the history of the Indies. And please forgive my Spanish. La Natural Historia de las Indias. So this is his tome, if you will. It's over 800 pages and I'm also about approximately 800 pages, but I'm also going to provide the link to that book for you all. And it is in Spanish, an old Spanish. So you may need some help translating it, even if you do speak Spanish. I mean, some of the words you'll definitely recognize, but it's old Spanish for sure. Now, one of the things I want to say about Ovidio is that he lived in the Caribbean and Central America for decades. He lived there. He actually interviewed conquistadors, settlers, and indigenous people. And one of the things that you can appreciate about his book was that he compared the regions repeatedly. Like, he was definitely about showing how America was not uniform in any way. And that's something to be noted even now, is when we go across the Americas and we look at indigenous peoples, there's no uniformity. Yes, there's definitely things that bind us and connect us, but there's so much diversity that it's almost like we're different people. So when you think about the translation of the book, which is really, really interesting, and I know that it would take forever to translate it, but when you see the book, there's no complete English translation. It's just done in volumes. And the thing about the portions that they have translated, it's very small compared to the volumes that he's written. It's pretty minuscule in terms of English translation. So that's why Ovidio is often quoted, but he's rarely read fully in English because the book is so large. Now, I've done a little bit of translation, but not a lot, even for the purposes of this presentation. And it's a lot there, but it can be done. And so here in this section, for instance, he writes, on the native people of the island of Hispaniola, which is the title of this section, and to use this as an example, a translation, the people of this island are by nature noble and well proportioned and of a complexion somewhat darker than the Spaniards, although there are some who are lighter and others more brown. They have straight, long, black hair and are well formed in body. So that's just one passage. I won't do that throughout the whole presentation because we'll be here all night. I'm just going to take English and condense it to the areas and the sections I really want to make a point about. And the biggest thing that I want to do is talk about how Oviedo observed the indigenous and some of the remarks that he made. And so we'll dive right in here. Now, when he spoke of the Caribbean, specifically Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Cuba, he described them as being moreno, which is brown, and more negro, which is some very dark. And others were lighter in complexion, specifically in the coastal and island areas, which I found quite interesting too. And there are other physical characteristics he used. He described their hair. Some of their hair was straight, some of their hair was wavy or curling, depending on the region. So I find that really interesting. And so what this suggests to me is that there was a great deal of already intermarriage and cultural mixing long before the Europeans arrived. Now, when we look at particular photos today of, I would say, the descendants of the Aboriginal people or the indigenous people, were all different colors, right? And I think that's what trips up a lot of people because we think that we see uniformity in cultures, but people are mixed so much. So when you look at certain people from different countries, just know that they are somewhat representative of their ancient ancestors. But I just thought I always find this really intriguing. And here's some pictures of Dominican Republic ladies, and I mean it's just beautiful the diversity that you see, and but it's quite clear that there has been a great deal of cultural mixing and intermarriage. Fascinating, and you cannot tell any of these ladies that they are not Dominican at all. They will definitely remind you that they are very, very much Dominican. There's also some photos here of people from Puerto Rico. Very, very fascinating. Now, of course, this isn't exhaustive, but I just wanted to show some examples. And so, moving to Central America, Oviedo also talked about the territories Panama, Costa Rica, and Nicaragua. And he spoke of the complexion of them being darker than Caribbean islanders. He also says some groups were almost black, others of quote unquote good appearance and lighter than many Spaniards. So again, he had made various observations of people within Central America. And here's some photos of people from Panama. Again, incredible diversity. I love it. Absolutely love it. Now, when he talked and spoke of northern South America, like in Colombia, Venezuela region, he said they were very dark-skinned in the lowland and river regions, and they were lighter and even fair complexioned in highland areas. And then there were some groups with thicker, curlier hair, which is what, we've been seeing. And then in Mexico, which they called that New Spain, they were generally brown or tawny. And in the rural and southern populations, they were darker. and some communities were lighter than the Spaniards. So again, a lot of diversity in these regions. So here we have people here, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, and then Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Cuba. A lot of diversity. So final thought I have here is, as we can see, there is no single Indigenous complexion. It wasn't like that back then, and it's not like that now. Right? And America contains several Indigenous nations of many colors and many forms. So I think this is really, really important to continually note, to continually remind ourselves as we start talking about who's Indigenous and how we identify. Because you can't just look at anyone and say, oh, you're not Indigenous because you don't have long, straight, dark hair. So there you have it. I'm glad that you all stuck with me through this presentation. I tried to keep it as succinct as possible, but I just wanted to talk about this for a moment and put this down on the record. And of course, this book is, we can go into this book a lot, and I will in the future. But definitely make sure that you go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, which will be going out shortly. And if you also want to be a guest, again, if you want to be a guest on the show, there's also a short form to fill out there as well. So we look forward to speaking to you soon, and we will be doing this again in 2026. But I may drop another video this year. I mean, how many more days do we have? You guys, maybe about 6 more days. But thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Again, I'm Lucas Robinson Jordan. I will be talking to you soon. Thank you so much.